Welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation to this conference. It's an honor for me to be the first speaker, and I hope everything will work out fine. I will share my screen now, and as you already announced, my topic will be the COVID-19 pandemic as a collective limit situation. I would like to start with a quotation of Albert Camus from his famous novel, The Plague, La Peste, which appeared in 1947. It was written during World War II, time of extreme distress, anxiety, and despair. And Camus processed this collective experience in Dr. Rieu's report. Dr. Rieu is a physician, a report of a fictitious plague in the Algerian city of Oran. And the quotation runs like this: "Thus, the first thing that plague brought to our town was undoubtedly the feeling of exile, that sensation of a void within which never left us, that irrational longing to hark back to the past or else to speed up the march of time. And then we realized that the separation was destined to continue. We had no choice but to come to terms with the days ahead. We had nothing left but the past. And even if some were tempted to live in the future, they had speedily to abandon the idea." In this novel, the Black Death puts the city into a state of emergency, seals it off from the outside world as a result of quarantine, and claims thousands of lives. And in this way, the novel also depicts the collective confrontation of people with death and with the finiteness and absurdity of existence in general. The quotation also makes it clear how the epidemic breaks through the temporality of the habitual life, throws people out of normality into the exile, and thus radically confronts them with their naked existence. It becomes a limit situation in the sense of the term as Karl Jaspers has developed it. These are situations in which an individual is faced with a radical break of his familiar course of life. The previously concealed or suppressed basic conditions of existence come to light and may no longer be denied. This concept may also be applied to collective limit situations. And the COVID-19 pandemic may be regarded as such a limit situation. It has thwarted, crossed many previously reliable habits and expectations on which our everyday existence is based. From the self-evident forms of welcome to a freedom of travel and movement, and to the ideas of a never-ending progress. According to Jaspers, the limit situation opens up the possibility to take hold of one's existence anew. And in what follows, I will introduce Jaspers' concept, apply it to the current pandemic, and finally give some considerations on possible chances and possible developments for the future. According to Jaspers, in limit situations, the contradictory and irreconcilable conditions of existence come to light. For instance, the inevitability of freedom and decision, the unavoidability of separation or guilt, the frailty of one's body, or the finitude of life. In each limit situation, the carpet is drawn away from under one's feet, as Jaspers writes, namely the carpet of implicit assumptions and belief systems which carry our everyday life. Something gets Housings are fixed frameworks of beliefs and expectations which should offer protection from the implicit, commonsensical, unquestioned assumptions about life, about oneself and the world. Assumptions which hide the contradictions of existence. One might also call them existential defense mechanisms. Here are some examples. The world is set in a fundamentally just manner. As long as I do nothing wrong, I will suffer no injustice. This is a special defense of a person prone to depression, the so-called melancholic type. If I only strive enough, this will finally be rewarded. That would be a dependent or perfectionist defense. If I subordinate to others, I can count on their shelter and guidance. Again, the dependent defense. If I do everything in a perfect way, life is under my control and I cannot be taken by surprise. Fate cannot harm me. The perfectionist, the anancastic defense. And finally, if I move up and achieve more and more, I will be invulnerable and death cannot harm me, cannot affect me. The narcissistic defense. It is obvious that such basic assumptions often follow the pattern that there cannot happen what must not happen. So evil, injustice, coincidence, even death may exist, but they cannot really affect me. I haven't done anything. I'm innocent. I'm special. So different personality structures, as we have seen, are characterized by different existential defense mechanisms. And one of the most basic assumptions we live by is, according to Husserl, the assumption of the and so on. The fundamental familiarity with the world consists in the implicit assumption that the world will somehow exist and go on as usual. Limit situations thus shatter the assumptions and confront us with another hidden side of existence. Such assumptions are necessary for societal and technological processes. They are necessary for making predictions and having control. But limit situations shatter these assumptions, confront us with a hidden side that we haven't taken into account. As Jaspers writes, the conscious experience of the limit situation, which was previously concealed by the secure housing in the objective forms of life, conceptions of reality, ideas of belief, let now a process begin which brings the previously and taken for granted housing to dissolution. Now it becomes more or less clear what the housing is, and this is experienced as attachment, limitation, or as doubtful, without possessing the strength for offering a stable foundation. In this sense, limit situations have an uncovering nature. The conciliatory beliefs about the world can no longer be maintained, and the individual sees himself confronted with another dimension of reality. However, the situation of the limit is also an opportunity for Jaspers to seize one's existence anew. Although we are unable to tackle limit situations by rational strategies, we may overcome them through, I quote, a totally other activity, the becoming of the possible existence in ourselves. We may become ourselves in that we enter the limit situation with open eyes. And thus, in limit situations, the person is faced with the possibility of being authentically oneself. and thus with his or her inevitable freedom and responsibility. It is, one could say pointedly, it is in and through failure that we may become aware of our freedom. Now, the pandemic as a limit situation. Sorry, I see yeah. I don't find the right slide now. Anyway, I continue without the slides. The limit situation of COVID-19 is now a collective, even a worldwide crisis that has overthrown much of the housings we live in. What basic assumptions and convictions are questioned by the crisis? We thought we had everything under control. We thought we could go ever faster, higher and wider. This is the first assumption that we could name. The pandemic questions our collective ideas of continuous progress, continuous growth, acceleration of all movements of production, consumption, communication. Our whole economic and political system is based on these ideas, and we are not used to questioning them. This is part of what may be regarded from a psychiatric point of view as a collective mania. And it is also the main reason for the ecological and climate crisis. A next assumption. If we use time better and better, we can constantly improve and optimize ourselves. Then we have everything under control and we are safe from decline and loss. This is another housing or belief system which is thwarted by the pandemic. We do not have everything under control. We have to bear uncertainty. And an even more existential assumption in the face of finitude and death is the following. If we make the most of our time, if we increase the density of events and experience, then we can cheat death, as it were. And in this assumption lies an essential driving force for the general acceleration of society. Increasing the pace of life, however, means increasing the number of episodes of experience per unit of time. And thus, economic and existential motives work together in the same direction. Driven by capitalist dynamics, as well as by a collective last-minute panic, the wheel of innovation, production, and consumption is turning ever faster. This expectation and conviction to be able to make more and more use of life, to condense it more and more, has been thwarted by the pandemic. Many societies underwent an extensive lockdown, almost an emergency stop, a dramatic reduction of mobility and exchange, a closing of national borders, standstill of large parts of society. Thus, it was a limit situation in many respects, but I will focus on the dimension of temporality in particular. Sorry. Seems I've somehow lost the slides. I don't know what's happening here. Let me see just a moment. It seems that the slides do not show up for some reason. I don't know why. Aha, that's the reason. I have to keep it like this, obviously. in order to not skip the slides. For some reason, when I switch to the presentation mode, the slides don't show up. I'm sorry for this technical problem. That's why I had the difficulties. All my slides were lost because they don't show up. That's really a problem. Okay, let's continue here. I will focus on the temporal aspect. And this is an aspect of deceleration or standstill of time, so to speak. And I take two quotations here. Time has slowed to a crawl. The days are a blur. 2 weeks ago feels like 2 years ago. Or the COVID-19 time warp, why it feels like time has slowed during this pandemic. Now, anecdotal reports like these illustrate how the pandemic has distorted our flow of time. In April, half of a sample of interviewed Americans said they felt that the time dragged. And the overall deceleration of time is not only due to the lockdown or social distancing and seclusion at home, but also to the sense of a doubtful and potentially threatening future. Such an unpleasant prospect also changes our sense of time. What else has changed? During the lockdown, time seemed to only consist of the present. And like the people of Oran in Camus' novel, we have fallen out of time, time in the sense of the constant timing and clocking, where events are interlocked like in a gearbox. We now realize how condensed and compressed our life normally proceeds, clocked and determined down to the day, the hour, the minute. Moreover, mobility has decreased dramatically, most of all during the first month of the lockdowns in several countries. There's a worldwide decline. Well, you see how the deceleration looked like in German towns. Here are pictures of Berlin and other German towns during the lockdown. There has also been a worldwide decline in air travel through the corona pandemic. So here you see the orange graph, the orange curve shows the number of flights worldwide in 2020 as compared to the greenish ones in 2019. Moreover, as a result of the slowing down of flights, air pollution shows a dramatic decrease. These are satellite images of nitrogen oxide concentrations over China, which had an unusually clear sky, as you see, during February. So this was January, and this was February, an unusually clear sky over all Chinese cities. And this shows that civilization no longer poisoned nature with exhaust gases, at least for a certain time. Moreover, one could say that the coronavirus pandemic has become an unfolding collective trauma that has ushered in an era of profound uncertainty and fear about the future. For many people with a particular psychological vulnerability, this uncertainty of the future becomes an existential threat. One of my patients, for example, a single teacher, became increasingly isolated and anxious as a result of the lockdown. She was particularly affected by the complete uncertainty as to when this state of affairs would pass. The future seemed foggy and threatening to her, and she eventually fell into a severe suicidal depression. But this individual vulnerability is matched by a collective vulnerability of our society, which seems to be extremely disturbable by all interruptions and failures. The volatility and swings of stock market prices even minor shows and manifests even minor breakdowns immediately. Even more, the corona pandemic reveals a deep fragility of our society, which is essentially due to the increasing condensation of all its processes. Today, not only are economies locked into tight supply chains, also in our everyday lives, our mobility, our relationships, one thing must always mesh seamlessly with another. For all this, we need to have planning security. Under no circumstances should we be surprised. And a society, on the other hand, that lives by this claim to have everything under control, also constantly struggles with the fear that something could go wrong because it cannot deal with it. And feelings of omnipotence and powerlessness are close together for such societies. Now, finally, as I said at the beginning, Jaspers also saw in limit situations the chance of the individual to find a new, a more authentic and more self-responsible stage of existence. What could be the chances that the collective limit situation of Corona offers to us? Now, the first would be the possibility to turn to the present. We must manage without far-reaching plans, without clear directions towards the future. But this is precisely why we can feel present in an unusual way. We listen to the announcements, hoping for an alleviation of the restrictions, but nobody can tell us exactly what will happen. But this is also how we can enter the present. What is happening right now? What is really important for me and for us? What emerges from this particular situation? The next chance would be breaking out of routines. The crisis can enable us to step out of the loops of routine, of one's orientation to fixed goals, and to recalibrate one's perceptions, one's priorities. Every readjustment and change of habits needs a period of slowing down, of conscious attention. And in order to change our usual way of life, we need to reduce its speed. Then the next, the impossible, one could say, loses its power. Many things which we were always told that were impossible, without alternative, all at once become possible. We can work in home office. We can do without intercontinental flights. Even the economy is no longer the highest value. It has to submit to the shelter of older people in particular, who do not even contribute to economic growth. And fourth, new developments may become possible. We may rethink the breathless rush of our economic or social life, both in the small and in the large scale. We may take sustainability and health as guidelines for the economic recovery after the crisis. And we may gain a new relationship with the living, with all the creatures we live with on Earth. After all, the spread of viruses also has to do with the fact that the habitats of wild animals are increasingly being decimated, favoring the transmission of pathogens. And the final opportunity and the final chance, one of the main lessons that we can learn from the Corona crisis is that we need to rethink and correct our attitude towards the future. The future is also what is coming towards us. The German term Zukunft, the French avenir, and the Spanish porvenir all literally mean the arrival, the advent of something that we haven't foreseen. So the future is not only what we plan and foresee, but also what encounters us, what surprises us, and what questions our previous basic assumptions, our housings, so to speak. And this happens in every real encounter with another person already. But also it happens in coincidences, in surprising events, and in crises, which we do not wish to happen, but which give us a chance to develop. The appropriate attitude towards this future is not one of control and protection, but of trust. Trust means that we place ourselves in other hands, that we do not want to control and dominate everything. Trust means giving others and the world the freedom to meet us as they wish. It means allowing to be surprised, to be questioned. There is no question that a life of trust is more uncertain, more open, and seemingly more vulnerable than a life of complete control. But from trust grows an inner strength, which is ultimately greater and more effective than the housing of deceptive external securities. Trust is a force dwelling within us, which not only enables us to cope with the uncertain, but also draws us towards the uncertain. Because the uncertain, the unexpected, the surprise is the only place where we can ultimately grow and develop. The uncertain is nothing else but life itself. And only in life itself may we grow and mature. Thank you very much for your attention.